Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nishant, and welcome to another episode of the Nishant Garg Show. The mission of the show is to spread awareness on mindfulness practices, psychology, mental health, and spirituality. My job on this show is to invite world-class performers to share the practices to live a fulfilled life. This episode guest is Tara Miller. Tara Miller is a psychotherapist, author, speaker. Tara has her master's degree in counseling and is trained in Advanced Self-Regulation Therapy, SRT, with a decade of private practice work as a clinician specializing in trauma. Tara continues her work worldwide as a consultant for resilience, mental performance, burnout prevention, and more, using a neuroscience-based approach to regulating the nervous system. Her articles and research have been published across North America, where she is regularly invited to speak to professionals, entrepreneurs, athletes, educators, and healthcare professionals on her approach to building lifelong resiliency and agility. In this episode, Tara talks about self-regulation therapy, how to use this therapy in healing and trauma, how to cultivate resilience, the power of meditation in healing. And to know more, keep listening. Tara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here and to meet you this way.
I'm thrilled and excited to have you, a psychotherapist, an advanced self-regulation therapist on the show. Tara, so how would your family describe, or I should ask you, how would your children describe what you do for a living?
That's a great question. My children would say that they haven't always appreciated that I am a psychotherapist because they don't want to feel like they're clients of mine in some of the parenting that I've done. And I've certainly used what I've learned in the practice of psychotherapy in parenting. So they might not say that they always appreciate it, but one thing as they've gotten older, because of the ages that they are sharing and showing ways that they have become resilient, healthy, strong individuals as teenagers that when asked, they often attribute to the way that our family operates and the dynamics that we have in this. So they have two sides of opinion on my role is in my profession, in that they appreciate the byproduct of it at this point, but they don't always appreciate it in the moment.
Why is it that?
Well, because nobody wants to feel like they're being, therapized or psychoanalyzed. And it's a balance to be connected, but still be able to offer tools. And as a parent, there's a fine line, I think, always of how much you coach and share and how much you just sit and listen. And so it's been something I work on daily to make sure I'm not overstepping into making my kids mini clients. And so I think that part of it is that sometimes they feel like I know too much about them.
Is it good to know too much about your kids?
I think it is good. I love the knowing where their brains are developmentally. I feel like that's important as a parent to know what's happening in the brain formation as they're growing, because it informs so much of their behavior and how their personality and their identities are forming. I find it a fascinating process to witness and to allow that to happen on their own terms and to encourage that individuality. But I think, like always, sometimes they want to be left without interference, or they want to be seen but not seen too much, which is a common theme for a lot of people. Is we're vulnerable, but we don't always want to be seen in that vulnerability. And I think the same goes for kids.
How did you become a psychotherapist?
Well, I never wanted to be one, so I kind of fell into it. I never thought I would end up in a helping profession at all. And my background was I was a professional dancer, so I was driven to the arts. After an injury, I went back to university and I went into communication studies. So I came into professional life working in marketing and communications and journalism. And that's really where I thought I was going to stay. And then I had a car accident where I actually was T-boned as a passenger. So my right shoulder was injured. And as a journalist at that time, I had to sit in front of a computer typing most of the day. And that car accident interfered with my ability to continue to do that job. And as part of the process of healing that trauma and then some traumas that happened within a course of a year from the first car accident, I ended up finding self-regulation therapy as a client, as a patient. And as I regulated my nervous system, as I healed from some of those traumatic events, I ended up really feeling like everything I had gone through must have happened for a reason, and that I was able to come out of it with so much health and vitality and optimism that it was something that I decided much later in life. So I went back to grad school at 39 to get my master's degree so that I could train to be a psychotherapist, because of the process of what life had taken me through.
You mentioned about self-regulation therapy, SRT. Could you explain more on that for the listeners who are not aware of this therapy process?
Sure. It's a neuroscience informed practice, which is looking at what they know about how our mind and our body, which are always interconnected, which we refer to as the nervous system, but really it's all of us. Everything is connected to everything. And it looks at how, instead of traditional psychotherapy where they've tried to separate the mind and brain from the rest of the body, it looks at everything being impacted as one and as a feedback loop. So with what I went through, what I loved about it was traditional therapy would try to give me tools about how to think and behave differently, and it didn't work for me. When I went through this process with self-regulation therapy, what I loved about it was all of the science about how the nervous system is impacted by trauma, how it holds trauma, the different ways that manifests in people's symptoms, including in their physical health, and how it heals from trauma. And so SRT really put the pieces together of why I was experiencing the things that I was, why I wasn't healing with traditional approaches. And because it works with regulating the nervous system, it got me to a place of baseline health and resilience that I was able to really experience more emotional and mental flexibility and health than I ever had before, but also more physical health than I ever had before. And so it drew me to it because it was science-backed, it was very effective, it was very gentle, and it just made sense to me that everything in our mind and body is connected, and that needs to have integrity in how people are treated.
Could you please elaborate on the experience that you were going through before going to the SRT therapy and what you couldn't heal?
Sure.
Before that.
Right. So I had been a kid that had been quite a sick kid. I had multiple procedures and surgeries growing up. So I wouldn't ever say that I had the best physical constitution going into adulthood. I was also diagnosed with fibromyalgia at a very early age. I had very bad asthma and allergies all through childhood and going into my early 20s. Some of those things subsided a little or were manageable, but it was really when I had the one car accident. I had this car accident, which was kind of the turning point. And I think a lot of people have a moment where things shift in their life in a way that it doesn't shift back or it causes them to make new choices. So the car accident really started that year off. And within that year, what had happened was really quite remarkable in terms of being horrible, in that there was a second car accident shortly after where I was rear-ended. I developed a very severe, life-threatening MRSA infection, followed by double pneumonia. I became very thin. I was very sick. I was a single mother, so I had recently gotten divorced. And then I ended up in the hospital with my son for 2 weeks, who was 3 at the time, and they thought he had early stage leukemia. So all of this happened in about 3 months. And luckily, he didn't have leukemia, and he did have another condition that was an inflammatory condition that then healed. But as we went through that year, I wasn't able to work. He was recovering and on medications while they were discovering what was wrong with him. And everything seemed to suffer as far as mentally and emotionally. My doctor was concerned about depression and anxiety. I had more pain, of course, that wouldn't get better. My shoulder should have healed, and they couldn't figure out why it wasn't getting better. And there was a whole host of not just emotional concerns, but also physical concerns that happened because of all of that trauma. And that year ended with us being, my kids and I, being quite poor, struggling a lot. And then their dad committed suicide. So that closed up the year for us. And that was so much trauma in such a short period of time with two very, very small kids. And it led me to find other solutions to get us out of it, because I knew that they were going to need a hero. I needed to become that hero. I needed to find ways to get really strong and really healthy, because I was the only parent left to move us really out of this horrible time of events and into something better. And those choices and moving into SRT as a therapy and then as a profession really did pull us out in the best possible way.
After you went through SRT as a patient, what did you heal?
Well, I no longer had allergies. I no longer had asthma. So I had 35 years of being on corticosteroids to treat my asthma. I was able to work through certain processes to heal from that. So that cleared up. I no longer had any symptoms for fibromyalgia. I no longer met diagnostic criteria for PTSD, for anxiety, for insomnia, for irritable bowel. I mean, I have a list of all the things that I was diagnosed with and afflicted with prior to that. And then all of those things got worse during that year of trauma. But it was after doing some of that work, and it only took about 2 years to really help all of this start to heal and resolve and dissipate. And it was one of those experiences where I didn't really think about it. I wasn't focused on the symptoms or the label or the disorder. I was focused on just bigger goals, getting out of this, being as strong as possible. And little by little, I would notice, oh, I don't have that symptom anymore. Oh, I don't have that anymore. Oh, this has gotten better. So it was this really cool process of just realizing as the symptoms went away and I got healthier, it just felt like such a natural process. It wasn't forced, it wasn't painful, it wasn't overwhelming. And it reminded me of the body and the mind's incredible ability to heal.
There are many forms of therapy. How did you get into SRT only? And I'm asking you because if somebody is listening to this podcast and they may be going through any trauma, stress, or anxiety, any issue in their life, and they are not sure what kind of therapy they should opt for.
So I always recommend something that does have the neuroscience backing, is mind-body connected. SRT isn't really well known, and there's a few hundred therapists trained in it. And other ones that are similar would be somatic experiencing, I believe sensory motor therapy is another one that's quite similar. So I would look for ones that are talking about, and people can call a therapist and ask about the approach. The ones I recommend would be any of the ones that have a gentle approach. I would recommend against the ones where they are asking you to make a list of all the traumatic experiences that you've had. I would recommend against ones that ask you to talk about your trauma. What we know is that what we think about and talk about fires and wires up in the brain, and so it actually can make it worse. It can make it last longer. And so with SRT, you can find somebody that works in that way where you can work around the trauma, but you're not talking about it each session. You're not going through it as it happened in session. You're not recapitulating or reliving or reimagining the same thing that injured you. That it takes you to a place where it's a lot calmer. It takes your nervous system into a calmer baseline, because it understands that we don't heal from trauma in the same level of activation that the trauma occurred. We heal the brain and we heal the body in a much more calmer, relaxed state of rest. We can build resilience in an activated state, but really to heal, it doesn't happen in the same state that the trauma occurred in. So you want to look for a therapy that is looking to get you into a parasympathetic, calm, regulated state to move through your life and to move forward. So the focus is on moving forward versus going back and digging up old trauma.
This is a very strong statement. You mentioned that. So you are saying that we don't have to talk about the past all the time. If we are trying to heal trauma, we don't have to go back into the past childhood memories to resolve that. We have to find ways to move forward.
Yeah.
Could you walk us through some practices that if we can apply in our daily lives, even if we don't have any therapist? Some basic practices.
Sure. I mean, with some of the stress that people are going through right now, I think it's a really good time for people to explore different alternatives and new things that are going to help them increase their ability to mitigate stress and move forward with their lives and find health. We're more focused on health now more than ever. And so this is a really good time to practice some of these techniques. One of the things that I'm a big fan of is the sense of definitely not looking back unless you're looking back into time to get resources. So if I'm noticing in this moment that I'm not feeling quite right, or I'm feeling agitated, or there's something that is not kind of an optimal state for me, I will look around into the time zones of past, present, and future and decide where of those have the most resources for me so that I can feel differently. So if I feel like I'm lacking confidence, or I feel like I'm lacking clarity, I can use going into the past to find good things. I can go into the past and find moments of my life where I was very accomplished, or I achieved something that was really important to me, or I had victory somewhere. So I call it the history of victories, where we can go into the past to pull out moments. History of victories. We pull out the best parts of our life, and as we think about them, the brain lights up in all the ways as if it's actually happening in this moment, and it self-medicates on the spot. It puts us into a state quite naturally of feeling the way that we used to feel then. So going into the past can be helpful if we're digging for gold, not if we're digging for trauma. So I'll use the past if I need to grab a state that I've had before or enjoyed before, and I want to have it now. And I can use that and kind of transplant into this moment and experience it now. And I can do the same with the future. So as much as I want to be in the moment, and SRT is very much working with the here and now, where we are in this moment, learning how to be very present and attuned, I also will grab what I need from the future. If I'm struggling right now, and I'm struggling to get through some of the chaos of the world, or I'm feeling drawn down by anything or anyone, I can look into the future and think, okay, if I could fast forward out of this moment, a year from now, what do I hope that my life is going to be like? Or what am I working towards? Or what would be optimal best case scenario? And if I imagine being out of this moment into a new one that I like and enjoy more, or something that I'm looking forward to, the brain starts to organize to help me get the things that I want. But it also, in this moment, will grab the feelings from the future moment. So I can grab feelings from past or future and enjoy them in the present. And it's kind of one of those, I don't like to use the word hack. It's kind of like a hack, though. I can hack my state by deciding how I wish I was feeling that I'm not. I can go somewhere and grab it think about it. And in this moment, I'll feel it and experience it and be able to enjoy that state in this moment.
I love it. So you are saying that it's kind of a dance. We are living in the present
Yes.
moment here and now, and we have the option to go back into the past, dig down all those good memories, not the bad feelings, not the bad
Yep.
memories. And if in the present moment, if I'm feeling unfocused, overwhelmed, or unclear about something, I can go back into my past and think about when was the last time I felt in a similar situation and what did I do? If I can use the same
Yep.
tools and resources into the present moment, or in visualizing about the future, if I'm
Yes.
struggling with something, what would it look like to accomplish this? That going for the feelings, going for the goal. Why do you think we human beings always think about the bad thing in the past and not focus on the positive things when we have the tools in our body, in our self to focus on the positive?
Well, I think it's quite natural for us. They call it the negative bias, where we're
Yes.
naturally drawn to negativity. It's so easy to go to the negative. And hundreds of years ago, it served us for survival because the negative thing that we always had to look for was life-threatening. Now we have this old brain that's rigged up for survival, but it's living in a new world. And we're inundating it with false fight or flight stimulus. So movies and music and screens and busyness and a different and askew way of living that the brain hasn't quite adapted to. And in a way, I hope it doesn't, because in its pure form, it does a better job. But it naturally goes to the negative, because what it's looking for is this going to hurt me? Is this going to threaten my life? And it's overwhelmed right now. So it's just constantly going to the negative. And then we do this as a collective. What's interesting is if it is really difficult in the beginning to fight against the negative bias, because you're kind of going against how the brain is designed to operate in a much different society. But if you start training your brain to look for the positive and to look for resources and to visualize optimal outcome, and you start fighting against that, you can actually build new neural pathways in your brain that over time, the brain will use it more as a habit. And so we all know those people that they always find the silver lining, or they always seem to have trust that things are going to work out. They have that sense of optimism. So we know it's possible. But if we just let our brains run rogue on their own, they will always go back and grab the negative as if it might help us survive. And really, it does the opposite. So having the awareness of that means that we can start shifting the pattern and building new brain pathways to support having more of a positive, optimistic stance.
I want to ask you, when you get into a rut or when you feel frustrated in your life, do you talk to your therapist? Do you talk to somebody else? Or what do you do?
So I do check-ins with my therapist, who is the co-creator of SRT. So I got lucky in finding really the best, I think, that there is in this field. And that's who helped me get through my traumatic experiences, who helped train me, and who I am privileged to go to when I need a little bit of a tune-up. Because the reality is we kind of do this work best when it's connected to another nervous system. We attune and attach and bounce off another nervous system. And when it comes to trauma, we often need another nervous system that's really grounded to help hold the space and guide the session. And so I think that that's a good practice to have. I think every good therapist has a therapist, and I will definitely check in with mine. I usually have so many different tools I can use on my own that I will see my therapist after I've exhausted kind of what I've already done. So, I mean, the first thing I'll do to change my state is usually do something physical. I'll go for a walk. I'll do a workout. I'll bounce up and down on a rebounder. I'll do push-up. Like, I'll do something physical to change the neurochemistry, to change my blood flow, to change something physically. And Tony Robbins talks a lot about this, how the fastest way to change your mood or change your mind is to do something with your physical state. So I've borrowed from that, and I find that really helpful, especially during the stress of 2020, what I've noticed is I've wanted to work out more because it has been harder to regulate. So my workouts are flourishing because I'm using them as coping mechanisms for, some of what we're all experiencing. So that's what really my go-to would be that. I also notice a huge difference if I skip meditating, if I fall out of practice with doing some kind of meditation practice, and I have different guided ones that I like or different frequencies I'll listen to. And then the kind of the self-care practices where allowing myself to be selfish. I actually
Self-care and
encourage
selfish.
people. I encourage people to be really selfish if they're feeling stressed out or if they're having a difficult time. It's the best way to tune into what you really need in the moment. So for me, every hour I'll think, what do I need right now? And maybe I already have it, so then I can just carry on. But if I need something else, if I need hydration, if I need food, if I need any of my basic needs covered, if I need exercise, if I need meditation, I'm checking in with my body and what signals it's giving me on a regular basis. And then I'm giving myself what I need no matter what. And I make that a priority, and it makes me much better at taking care of other people in my life by having this approach where every day I'm selfish about taking care of myself and my needs on an hourly basis.
Self-care is not selfish.
I know. Selfish gets a bad rap. I think selfish is a good word. I've turned it around here to be a good word, which means I'm taking care of myself.
I read this definition in one book called Awareness, that selfishness is something when we manipulate others to fulfill our demands. And self-care is we are focusing on ourselves. We are filling our cup first before we give love to somebody, before we give care to somebody. So self-care is very important. And
so important.
Tara, you mentioned that SRT is being here and now, and we are talking about self-care practices. We are talking about meditation. As a listener, I'm thinking about, are we talking about mindfulness or therapy?
What I love about SRT is it is mindfulness without the word. I don't know if the term came before or after or is woven in between, but it is about this moment. So that if I'm in a session, we might be talking about a little bit from the past or a little bit from the future. We use a lot of visualization, but everything comes back to this moment. So if somebody tells me something, I'll say, what do you notice? And what I'm asking them to do is look at what do they notice in their body in this moment. So everywhere we go in therapy always comes to this moment, which is, what are you noticing right now? And in that, they'll tell me physical sensations or emotions or whatever's coming up. And we're integrating those with just awareness of what's happening in the body. That alone helps regulate the nervous system. But you're right, everything in these sessions is, what are you noticing? And it's always in this moment.
How does meditation help in trauma and dealing with any problems or issues in our life?
Well, I know that there's so much research around meditation as far as how it helps support brain health and helps with the nervous system regulation. And I will use other approaches. Acupuncture is really good for helping the nervous system as well. So there's a whole bunch of different approaches that you can use. So it's not something that is necessarily recommended by every practitioner. It's something that I tried and felt like I failed at many times because it was difficult at first. What I found was that if I just kept trying, because it had so much science to support it, I was able to find an entry point into meditation that worked for me, which was guided meditation. And what I noticed is I was able to sit with that longer, and I was able to experience a settling in not just my body, but in my mind, no matter how long I sat with whatever guided meditation I was following. And being able to access that on my own really helped support any of the work I did in my SRT sessions. So for clients, I'll recommend the same, which is find a version of meditation that works for you. Try it for just 5 minutes and it will expand from there. But it's like anything new, it's experiencing a different state, which is sometimes uncomfortable. But there's so much science supporting how good this is for you. And when you have had trauma, you're often stuck in an activated state. You're often stuck in a higher state that's harder to come down from. This just supports the overall process of being able to find ways on your own and to have that sense of, yes, this is something I'm doing actively to encourage my own health and well-being. Find something that works for you, whether it's an app or a frequency or a different practice. There's so much out there right now, but it does benefit. It does give you a sense of calm, but also clarity.
Did you ever want to run away from meditation in the past?
I did, especially when I found whatever version said, just sit and try and clear your mind. And that was right. I mean, I wasn't through a whole lot of SRT work at that point. So I was really activated. It was more anxiety provoking for me to try and sit, which is a classic symptom of people that are kind of trapped or stuck in overwhelm. Is you try to do something for your health and the process of settling feels really uncomfortable. It feels like you want to run away because it's not just new, but it's showing you how much activation you have kindled in your system that you're running around all day with, which really burns us out from an energetic perspective, from a health perspective, from all of that. So I definitely wanted to run away from it. And if it wasn't for all of the research and the reports and the studies and people saying how integral it was for their own health and well-being, I wouldn't have persisted because it was too uncomfortable. But over time, now I know if I'm feeling overwhelmed and I've missed a day or two, if I drop back into that, it just is like a switch. It's so easy right now. But yeah, I definitely tried to run away multiple times.
One disadvantage with meditation is it takes time. It takes months and months to really
Yes.
get into the benefits of that.
Yes.
It's not something you go to acupuncture and you get instant relief. It's a process. Sometimes it has taken me 3 years to really get into the meditation practices. I can easily do it for 30 minutes now. I can do silent meditation. I can do guided meditation for more than 30 minutes. And you feel really amazing. And it's like a switch. You mentioned that it's a switch from overwhelm to calm.
Yes.
Can somebody use meditation for PTSD, post-trauma stress disorder?
I think that they could use it as part of some bigger or more encompassing or strategic approach. I think it's an important part of healing. I haven't worked with anybody that's healed their PTSD from it alone, but everyone that I've worked with that has had PTSD has benefited from using that as part of their healing protocol. So I think it's a really good complement to everything.
Do you think somebody who is going through any sort of trauma, they need a set of exercises, set of practices to heal those trauma situations? It doesn't happen through only one thing.
I would agree that there is some phrase out there about multiple roads to your destination. And what people are individual, and their experiences and their desires and their outcomes are individual. So I think that absolutely there can be multiple approaches. And what's most important is that people really want to heal. They're looking and investigating, and they have a deep desire for wellness, and they will find those things as they go along. I think SRT is the one that I recommend the most because it is so supportive of changing the brain in ways that allow people to be the fullest expression of their selves, to be the most symptom-free that I've seen out of other modalities, to experience joy. So we never end the process at just resolving one trauma or having their nervous system kind of reset once. The goal when I work with somebody is to move them beyond just symptom or repair and moving them into what is it like now that you are not shrunk down from trauma to expand and live the life that you've always wanted to live. And I think for a lot of people, when they stick with the process a little bit longer and then they add meditation and they add some supportive things, the outcome is not a goal that's necessarily tangible. The outcome that I see and that I've experienced is joy. Like every day I have a moment and multiple moments when for no reason, I just have this thought of, I'm so in love with this life. And it's spontaneous and
Wow.
it's natural and it's a joyful experience, not because anything profound has happened, not because, I'm living on a yacht and have millions and like there's the, whatever the goals are. It's been the practice of and the supportive elements and a desire to continue to have a peaceful, healthy, long life that has joy. And the joy is really deep and grounded. And what I love most about it is it's been practiced so much that now it's spontaneous.
The beauty of all these things is that it's not tangible, what you mentioned, and it's inner being thing. We are working on our inner being, and when we are calm, focused, and relaxed internally, it shows up, it manifests in our external goals. Then we all automatically achieve those material things when we are calm, relaxed, compassionate, mindful, when we have support system in terms of our therapist and different practices.
Right. Yeah.
Can't we achieve all this thing by being just positive? What do you think about the power of positive thinking?
It's essential, but really a regulated nervous system and that ability to experience all the emotions of life, all the experiences, and know that you can have the full experience and you can handle it and you can experience and tolerate, but always come back to baseline. To have that level of confidence in your own resilience, that's your baseline. And that's where you have your most creativity and your most success and your most appreciation and presence for life. Just thinking positive comes naturally from that state. If you're traumatized, if you're highly activated, it can feel almost impossible to just think positive. And if you're trying to think positive, but you're not connecting with your body, you don't have the awareness of what's happening in this moment, you can miss it. And it doesn't integrate into your full system, into your full self in the same way. So it's a great idea and everybody should do it. But if you layer it on top of having a regulated nervous system that can roll through life in that way, it's way different.
You are saying that if somebody is going through a trauma and we are trying to be positive all the time, it doesn't work because we have conflicting beliefs. It's like if we are having some trauma and we are just using positive affirmation words, I am this, I'm positive, it doesn't work. It may backfire.
It may feel at least frustrating because it doesn't feel like it's taking root. It's almost like you have to prep the soil before you can plant those seeds of positivity. You know what I mean? Like if you're in this state of fight or flight, the positive words are good and essential, but they're not going to imprint in the same way to have that lasting sense of, oh, right, now this is just becoming who I am. It becomes something you do without necessarily becoming transformative to who you are. But the power of language should never be underestimated. Our unconscious minds are picking up all of the things that we're speaking. So we want to speak positive and think positive and have those practices in place. But at the same time, it may not be enough if your nervous system is looking for a threat all the time.
Could you give us any instance from your life when, let's say, you were feeling frustrated and you were able to change that instance by the power of language? You shifted your language.
I probably can. Let me think. I mean, I had early on when I was going through some of the more tumultuous times, I had deep purpose that kind of pushed me through some of the work. And I learned some of these practices along the way. So I think I was still in the trenches and it wasn't as easy to kind of change my state. I still needed another nervous system to support and to reframe. I think now would be a good time. I've noticed feeling frustrated, activated. I've had moments of fear or concern. And my favorite is to use the fast forward approach, really, which is this isn't going to last forever. This is temporary, like everything. So I'll remind myself of the facts. But then the visualization I use frequently. And it's probably one of my favorite because I'll think, what am I looking forward to? How can I change my state in this moment? I can't change the moment. It's not in my control what's happening in the world or what's happening in parts of my life. But a year from now, what am I hoping to feel like? Where am I hoping to be? What experiences am I looking forward to? So I will visualize. I mean, my favorite place to go is Maui. So I will always visualize my next trip and being on a beach where there's really no worries. It's clean, it's fresh. I feel relaxed and supported. And I will visualize in great detail what it will be like and smell like and look like to be somewhere where I feel the best. And I'll change my state in this moment by doing that. So feeling like I can't travel right now, or feeling like I'm trapped, or any of those experiences that are so common, I'll think of the opposite. What is it going to be like when this is over and I'm free to go wherever I want, to do whatever I want? And I'll just pick somewhere and imagine being there, and it changes my state in an instant.
This is more of optimistic approach than just saying I'm positive. And Tony Robbins says that positive thinking is a BS.
Yeah, I think positive language, positive imagery, I agree with it, but I think experiencing it in detail and noticing how that moves and changes things in your body, making it an experience is what gives you a new neural pathway for it, which is much more profound than positive thoughts.
Tara, you talk about so many great things, and still you say that you are not a life coach. Why?
I'm not a life Well, because life coaches and psychotherapists, they do different aspects of work. So, as a psychotherapist, I'm looking at how can we get the nervous system regulated so you can go forward and live in a resilient, healthy way. And then I'll refer to a life coach that maybe has strategy or tools for specific goals or different approaches that maybe I don't use. So I think we can work together, but I definitely wouldn't say I'm a life coach because we're only working with the state. And I think coaching is looking at, training and getting closer and getting specifics for certain outcomes that might be different than what I do.
Then who should go for therapy and who should go for life coaching?
I think everybody benefits from this kind of therapy. And I think if you do this kind of work, you might not need other coaching or supplements, depending on, what you want out of your life.
Coaching is not a supplement.
It's not a supplement. I think, I don't know. I think therapy is a supplement for, I think, and I believe too, athletes get a coach to help them become better at what they're doing at competition or at reaching their goals or at accelerating or elevating where they're at. And I think we all have places where we can support one another depending on what people are working through or moving through.
And Tara, I want to ask you, what advice would you give to an 18-year-old kid to process their emotions?
Well, I have an 18-year-old kid right now that's struggling with processing.
I didn't know
emotions.
that.
I do. She's graduating actually next week. So it has been a difficult time because those emotions are big and they fluctuate quickly. And so we've had this conversation a lot about everything being temporary. These things are temporary. So if it's something good and positive, you want to absorb it and you want to indulge in it and you want to take more time to appreciate it and value it because it's temporary. But also the negative things are temporary too. So emotions are temporary in either direction. You can feel it, you can acknowledge it, and then you can look at the fact that it's temporary and what what are you looking forward to tomorrow? What can tomorrow be like? Or what can the next hour be like? Or what can you do to change the way that you feel right now? Who can you talk to? What exercise can you do? How can you interrupt the pattern? Because a lot of it right now is 18-year-olds are developing brain patterns for how they're going to have to respond automatically to life. So it's really critical, as their brain's still forming, that we're supporting some of these concepts. This feels big, and that's important, that you acknowledge that you can tolerate the emotion. Let's work out of it. How can we move forward from this? How can you take tools of how you've gotten through things in the past and use them in this moment? Can you take this moment and know that it's going to benefit you next year at university? So we're kind of stitching all of this together right now at our house, as far as, yes, all these emotions are big and they're important and they are temporary. So let's make sure we have perspective, and let's find ways to distract, to deal, to cope, to accept, and to move forward.
And how would you explain resiliency to a teenager?
So I would say, for a teenager or anybody, because it is a word that we're becoming more familiar with, to me, it really is the ability to bend without breaking. So there is a sense that adversity can come and it's uncomfortable, but you can stand and tolerate it. You can kind of weather the storm of it and have the confidence that you can come out of it and that life will get better. And at the same time, it's also the ability to have moments of joy and exuberance and excitement. And some people find that overwhelming. Even the positive emotions can be overwhelming. So resilience is being able to have some of these heightened positive moments and emotions, and experience them and indulge in them and love them for the moment that you have them, and then be able to come back down. So it's that fluidity of emotional and mental flexibility that allows you to roll through life and know that no matter what experience I'm having, I know I can get to the other side of the next experience.
No matter what experience we are feeling, it is all temporary. If we are feeling amazing, let's enjoy. If we are feeling depressed, down, let's deal with that. And that's where you're saying emotional resiliency comes into play, that ability to bounce back. If we are off track, how soon we can come on the track.
Right.
How can we cultivate more of resilience? What are the basic, simple practices would you recommend to our listeners?
Well, the awareness is the big one. And I know that we touched on this before, is once you're aware of the state that you're in, then you automatically start to, the brain almost looks to solve it on its own once you have the awareness. So breaking up old patterns, having the awareness of the state that you're in, getting a sense of, if I'm not in the state that I want to be in right now, what is the state that I want to be in, and what kind of things might get me there. So some of it is that really cognitive processing of breaking things down, looking at what you can control and what you can't control. And in your arsenal of how you maneuver through life, there's so much you can control, as far as I can control what I eat, how much I sleep, the people I spend time with, the content in the media, and the information I take in. I can control how I move my body. And there's so much of that when you start implementing any or all of those things, you do start feeling a little more in control of your perspectives.
And you talk about consumption of information is not knowledge. That if we keep consuming all the information and not practice in our daily lives, that information get lost.
It's true. And there was research about how much we actually don't absorb as far as knowledge, because if it's not put into practice, we've kind of heard it and been excited about it, but then it goes away. So the instant practice of learning or putting to use what knowledge you've gained is important for having it actually be knowledge. But we're in this time where, and I know many people that are listening to multiple podcasts and multiple channels of information, and they're saturated with new and good information. It's all positive, and yet it's not the same as knowledge. The information is not the same as knowledge, because a lot of it's getting lost because there's simply too much of it. it maybe doesn't have meaning for us. So if it doesn't have meaning, we kind of let it evacuate, or it's not being put into practice. And what I think knowledge really is when you take something that's new information and it has meaning for you, that you do something with it. And one of the things to do with it that they've shown is if you tell somebody about it. So it's like learning and then teaching integrates that as knowledge, but it should have some kind of sense of purpose and meaning or connection with either who you are or what you're aligned with or what you're looking for. But then I think slowing down how much information we take in so we can really start to discern if it's valuable for us or not, rather than subscribing to everything and retaining nothing.
If you don't consume information, do you feel it's kind of a fear of missing out?
I think so. There is something about this age in time where we're seeking information in attempts to soothe us. A lot of the times we feel activated and we're looking for information to make sense of it, provide meaning for us, or to soothe it. And I think it's a distraction from really connecting to what's happening in our mind and in our body in the moment. I think an easy way to not be present with yourself is to go seek a bunch of information and consume. There is a frenzy to that in some people that it becomes more activating.
It's like finding that sweet spot that we get to consume information and we still get to find quiet time, sacred pause time. We can go to the parks, in the nature, spending time in the nature when we allow our mind, because all the answers are deep buried in our body, in our mind. Our mind will bring all the answers if we allow some quiet time.
I agree. And in that, you get your nervous system regulates, which is where you will come up with the right answers for you versus somebody else's that we're trying to put in us. I think with all that's out there, we forget how much wisdom that we have in our own souls because we're kind of frantic looking for answers from others and forgetting that in those quiet moments, and especially like you said with nature, we have so much wisdom that we're not even tapping into because we're forgetting to slow it down.
How do you think about the journaling process if we just allow our mind to just wander and just put it on a piece of paper?
It depends on the state. So I often say what's most important is the state that you do things in versus just doing the thing. So if you're in a regulated state and you journal free flow, what will typically happen is you'll get creative ideas, you'll get affirmations, positive gratitude, all things that help the brain go in the right direction. If you journal in an aggravated state, typically what you get is everything from that negative bias, and it can actually make your state heightened or wired in tighter. So it depends the state that you're in when you do the journaling as far as how beneficial it can be for you. And even just the awareness that if you sit down and journal that you do have a negative bias, that will help you become aware of your brain trying to go and draw all of the negative moments or emotions out to put on paper. And the awareness will help you redirect to more of the gratitude practice that can be very beneficial and powerful for your brain.
Yeah, I think this gratitude and journaling can be a very amazing tool. In my personal life, I use it very often, in fact, a lot these days. In fact, I would spend hours and hours on the weekends just to think where I am right now and where I'm heading. And all these new creative ideas just come from the journaling process. It's like breaking our own thinking patterns and expanding our brain.
Yes.
Through creative ideas.
Love it.
You also talk about the increasing the capacity of our brain, not shrinking our lives to manage our symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Could you elaborate more on that?
Sure. It's an easy impulse. When life gets overwhelming, we kind of want to circle the wagons. We want to pull things in closer. We want to try and create a circle of life that feels manageable. And in the midst of trauma, that's normal and acceptable and a great way to kind of balance chaos versus control, or at least whatever the illusion of control is. But what happens is we can make that a habit, and where we forget to expand our lives, where we feel like, oh, I have it all together. I feel very calm and centered in my life. And then you'll notice that you've been shrinking when anything outside of your routine or your predictability or what you're expecting causes you to go into high states of activation, or to feel like you can't handle it, or to feel like you're coming unglued, that sense of it. Whereas real resilience is constant expanding of, okay, I recovered from this. Now I'm going to go and pick up a new sport, or pick up a new learning, or try a new business, or explore a new area. So this curious state of expansion and adventure is a natural, healthy state that will increase resilience in every part of our life. But what happens is we can get very comfortable in a small circle of containment where we become a slave to the routines and the structure that made us feel calm in the midst of chaos or trauma. We keep that, but in that we maybe use it as a crutch, and we forget that we can do new things and try new things and explore and expand our lives and our capacity for coping.
Because we human beings are infinite potential. There is no limitation to our being.
Right.
And Tara, before I ask you my last question, I want to ask you something very funny. In one of your TED Talk, you showed your daughter picture that she broke her 2 front teeth. Did she get it back?
She did get them back. And we didn't know. We didn't know she was going to get them back. She's a wildfire child, and I just adore that about her. But it at one point, she had no fear. She flew off top of the stairs, landed on her face, and lost her 2 front teeth prematurely. And she now has them back, and she has a beautiful smile for graduation. So all things are good.
It's good to have nice front teeth when you're 18.
It is.
Well, where can our listeners find you online, Tara?
The best place to reach me is my website, taradawnmiller.com. And there's a contact form there, and there's an ebook that you could download. But that's the best place to reach me.
Amazing. And I will put all the information in the show notes.
Great.
Thank you so much, Tara. It's been an amazing conversation with you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this podcast episode today. I hope you learned from this episode that you can apply in your life. If you did enjoy this, please subscribe to the podcast, The Nishant Garg Show, on Apple Podcast. You can also subscribe to the show through my website, https://nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me. You can also share this podcast with your family and friends, or whoever want to feel fulfilled. And thank you so much again.